الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح مندود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يسرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم اللهم سن وجوهنا باليسار ولا تهنا بالإقتار فنسترزق طالب رزقك ونستعتف شرار خلقك ونشتغل بحمد من أعطانا ونبتلى بذم من منعنا وأنت من وراء ذلك كله أهل العطاء والمنع اللهم كما سنت وجوهنا عن السجود إلا لك فسنا عن الحاجة إلا إليك بجودك وكرمك وفضلك يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين يا أرحم الراحمين. اغننا بفضلك عمن سواك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وهب لنا به صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم من رزقك الحلال الطيب المبارك ما تسون به وجوهنا عن التعرض إلى أحد من خلقك. واجعل اللهم لنا إليه طريقا سهلا من غير فتنة ولا محنة ولا منة ولا تبعة لأحد. وجنبنا اللهم الحرام حيث كان وأين كان وعند من كان. وحل بيننا وبين أهله وقبض عنا أيديهم واصرف عنا وجوههم وقلوبهم حتى لا نتقلب إلا فيما يرضيك ولا نستعين بنعمتك إلا فيما تحب وترضاه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إن كان رزقنا في السماء فأنزله وإن كان في الأرض فأخرجه وإن كان معسرا فيسره وإن كان بعيدا فقربه وإن كان حراما فطهره وإن كان قليلا فكثره وإن كان معدوما فأوجده وإن كان موقوفا فأجره وإن كان ذنبا فاغفره وإن كان سيئة فامحها وإن كان خطيئة فتجاوز عنها وإن كان عثرة فأقلها. وبارك لنا في جميع ذلك إنك مليك مقتدر. وما تشاءه من أمر يكون يا من إذا أراد شيئا إنما يقول له كن فيكون. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا الله يا علي يا عظيم يا حليم يا عليم أنت ربي وعلمك حسبي فنعم الرب ربي ونعم الحسب حسبي. تنصر من تشاء وأنت العزيز الرحيم. نسألك العصمة في الحركات والسكنات والكلمات والإرادات والخطرات من الشكوك والذنون وأوهام ساترة للقلوب أم مطالعة الغيوب. فقد ابتلي المؤمنون وزلزلوا زلزالا شديدا وإذ يقول المنافقون والذين في مرض ما وعدنا الله ورسوله إلا غرورا. فثبتنا وانصرنا وسخر لنا هذا البحر كما سخرت البحر لموسى وسخرت النار لإبراهيم وسخرت الجبال والحديد لداود وسخرت الريح والشياطين والجن لسليمان. وسخر لنا كل بحر هو لك في الأرض والسماء والملك والملكوت وبحر الدنيا وبحر الآخرة. وسخر لنا كل شيء يا من بيده ملكوت كل شيء. كافها يا عين صاد كافها يا عين صاد كافها يا عين صاد. انصرنا فإنك خير الناصرين وافتح لنا فإنك خير الفاتحين واغفر لنا فإنك خير الغافرين وارحمنا فإنك خير الراحمين وارزقنا فإنك خير الرازقين واهدنا ونجنا من القوم الظالمين. وهب لنا ريحا طيبة كما هي في علمك وانشرها علينا من خزائن رحمتك واحملنا بها حمال الكرامة مع السلامة والعافية في الدين والدنيا والآخرة إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم يسر لنا أمورنا مع الراحة لقلوبنا وأبداننا والسلامة والعافية في ديننا ودنيانا. وكن لنا صاحبا في سفرنا وخليفة في أهلنا وطمس على وجوه أعدائنا وامسخهم على مكانتهم فلا يستطيعون المضي ولا المجيء إلينا. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضي ولا يرجعون. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. شاهت الهجوم شاهت الهجوم شاهت الهجوم وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم وقد خاب من حمل ظلما. طاسين حاميم عين سين قاف مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. حاميم 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 حاميم. هم الأمر وجاء النصر فعلينا لا ينصرون. حاميم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز العليم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير. بسم الله بابنا تبارك خيطاننا ياسين سقفنا كافها يا عين صاد كفايتنا حاميم عين سين قاف حمايتنا فسيكفيكهم الله وهو السميع العليم ستر العرش مسبول علينا وعين الله ناظرة إلينا بحول الله لا يقدر علينا والله من ورائهم محيط بل هو قرآن مجيد في لوح محفوظ فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين إن ولي الله الذي نزل الكتاب وهو يتولى الصالحين حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم يا الله يا نور يا حق يا مبين اكسني من نورك وعلمني من علمك وأفهمني عنك وأسمعني منك وبصرني بك وقمني بشهودك وعرفني الطريق إليك وهونها علي بفضلك وألبسني لباس التقوى منك إنك على كل شيء قدير يا سميع يا عليم يا حليم يا علي يا عظيم يا الله اسمع دعائي بخصائص لطفك آمين أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات كلها من شر ما خلق يا عظيم السلطان يا قديم الإحسان يا دائم النعمة يا باسط الرزق يا كثير الخيرات يا واسع العطاء يا دافع البلاء ويا سامع الدعاء يا حاضرا ليس بغائب يا موجودا عند الشدائد يا خفي اللطف يا لطيف الصنع يا حليما لا يعجل اقض حاجتي برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنك تعلم ما نحن فيه وما نطلب ونرتجي من رحمتك في أمرنا كله ويسر لنا ما نحن فيه من سفرنا وما نطلب من حوائجنا وقرب علينا المسافات وسلمنا من العلل والآفات ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا تسلط علينا من لا يرحمنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We are reading Imam al-Ghazali's The 40 Principles of the Religion, page 220. Treating the sudden occurrence of ostentation. Perhaps you say, I have affirmed all of this for myself, and my heart is opposed to ostentation. However, maybe an occasion of ostentation will come up and assault me unexpectedly in some acts of worship when the creation sees me. So what is the treatment in the case of this assault of ostentation? Know that the foundation of this treatment is that you hide your acts of worship, just as you hide your immoral acts, for in this is security. It has been narrated that one of the companions of Abu Hafs al-Haddad censured the world and its people. So we said to him, you have shown what you should have concealed. Do not sit with us anymore. Know that hiding worship is only difficult in the beginning. When it becomes normal, one's nature becomes familiar with the pleasure of intimate conversation with Allah in private. When there's an assault of an occasion for ostentation, its treatment is that you renew in your heart that which was deeply rooted therein before. The realization that you are subjecting yourself to the loathing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the inability of people to benefit or harm you, until this produces an aversion to whatever calls to ostentation. Furthermore, whereas desire calls to responding to ostentation by beautifying deeds and rejoicing in them, aversion calls to repelling and turning away from it, and the latter is more powerful. If your aversion becomes strong enough to prevent you from relying upon ostentation, and you continue in your previous state, neither increasing nor decreasing, without falsely displaying the action or spreading news of it, then you have repelled any sin and are not responsible for any more than that. As for repelling thoughts and repelling one's nature from inclining to people's acceptance, this is not included in moral responsibility. The most that one is responsible for is to dislike ostentation and to refuse to answer its call. Displaying acts of obedience as an example and hiding them out of fear of ostentation. It is permissible to show acts of obedience in order for people to take them as an example and to encourage them. If one's intention is correct and there is no ulterior desire contained in it, the sign of this is that a person appreciates when the people follow the example of one of his peers, while he himself meets the requirements as a source of encouragement, and informs that the person's reward for acting in secret is like his reward for acting openly. then he does not desire showcasing. On the other hand, if his inclination is for himself to be the most followed, therein is the call to ostentation. Because if he was seeking happiness for people and their salvation, it has already happened through the following of another, and he has missed out on nothing except the opportunity to show himself. It is likewise permissible to conceal acts of disobedience and sin, however, with the condition that the person's aim is not for it to be believed that he is pious, but rather that he is not a sinner. There is no harm in a person rejoicing over the concealment of his sins and being upset about the exposure. This is either joy over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's concealment of him, or joy over agreeing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command, for He subhanahu wa ta'ala certainly loves the concealment of acts of disobedience and forbids being open about them. Alternatively, it is due to a dislike of censure and being hurt by it. This is not unlawful, but rather necessitated by human nature. What is prohibited is for a person to rejoice in people's praise of him on account of his worship, for indeed that is like a payment being taken for worship. A person may also fear being targeted with some badness if his disobedience is known, or he may be ashamed of his manifestation, and shame is not ostentation, although it could be mixed with it. As for abandoning an act of obedience due to fear of ostentation, there is no justification for it. Al-Fudail said, "It is from ostentation to abandon a good deed due to fear of ostentation. As for performing good deeds for the sake of people, this is associating partners with Allah. Rather, a person should act and be sincere, except if the deed relates to the creation, like the judiciary, governance, or preaching. If he knows about himself after delving into the deed, he will be unable to control himself, but will rather incline to the calls of desire than it's obligatory for him to turn away and run. This is like what many of the pious predecessors did. As for prayer and charity, a person should not abandon them unless the intention to worship is not present in the first place, but it is instead the intention of pure ostentation. In that case, his deed is not valid, and he should leave it. As for something that he does habitually, then a group attends, and so he fears for himself ostentation. He should not abandon the deed. Rather, he should continue with his worship and strive to repel the motivation of ostentation." Epilogue: the matrix of character and places of delusion within it. Know that blameworthy characteristics.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I thought you were going to read longer. How many pages you covered now? MashaAllah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والجنة للموحدين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق والمرسلين نبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the choicest of blessings and salutations upon our Master Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In yesterday's dars, Al-Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala covered a number of important points in relation to ostentation. And he spoke about ostentation in terms of its levels, of how apparent it is and how hidden it is. And he said that the most apparent ostentation, which is called jali, is when if people observes me, I will do the action, and had people not been observing me, I would not have performed the action. That's the greatest form or manifestation of ostentation, and that invalidates the act. The act is not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will be punished and you are sinful. He made the example of somebody that he enters salah, and then while in salah he realized he forgot. We shifted away from Ghazali's example. We said he forgot his phone. So now he wants to end his salah to get his phone because he fears somebody might take it or it might go missing. But then he realized people is watching me, so he only finishes salah because people are watching me, and had people not been there or ended his salah to go and fetch his phone. He said that's the most apparent form of ostentation, and that is sinful, and that results in Allah's punishment, and he said your action will not be accepted and not valid. He said then a more hidden form of ostentation is when a person, he enters into the action with sincerity. Meaning whether people are there or not there, he's going to make the prayer, make the salah. But then he realizes that people are observing him. So what happens now within him is, he becomes more active, or the action becomes easier for him. Right? Here Imam Ghazali said that the person who this is his state, his action will be valid. His action will be valid. However, he will be deprived of reward. Or in proportion to his ostentation, his reward will be diminished or decreased. No. And then he said an even more hidden form of ostentation is when he would do the act whether people are observing him or not. Number one. Number two is, when people are observing him, he doesn't become more active, neither does the action become easier for him. However, when people come to know of his action, either while he's in the salah or after he completed the salah, he becomes happy. He experiences joy that people came to know of his tahajjud, of his ibadah. And Imam Ghazali said that shows you that ostentation is hidden in him as how fire is hidden beneath the ashes of the coal. I explained that yesterday. No. So there again, his action will be valid, but he will be sinful, he will be punished, and he will be deprived of the reward of his action in proportion to how much ostentation he had. He then said the most hidden form of ostentation is that when a person, he does the act whether people observe him or people don't observe him. When people are observing him, it doesn't make him more active, neither does it make him find the act to be easier. It's all the same. When people come to know, it doesn't make him happy. So now, mashallah, he's in a good state. However, his nature is such that because he is a person of ibadah or he is a person of knowledge, there's an expectation that people must come and greet him and he shouldn't go greet others. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how common this is within a society. It's always better if you observe someone hesitating to come and greet you because there's an expectation that you must come greet him. First of all, that person has ostentation. And then you shouldn't be guilty of ostentation. You should go and greet the person. Unless you happen to be a person of knowledge, and that person expects that he must be honored because of his wealth or because of his position in society. That does not relate to deen, it does not relate to knowledge, it does not relate to taqwa. Right? Then you don't need to go and hasten to go and greet that person. Because by greeting him because he is a man of wealth, or he has money, or that is an even bigger problem. That is making ta'zeem of the dunya. Therefore, there's a beautiful example of this. I know this is actually yesterday's dars, but this meanings are just coming to me now. There's a beautiful demonstration of this when Habib Ali al-Jifri, our Shaykh, Sayyid al-Habib Ali al-Jifri, was conducting a series of classes in Syria. What did they call it? Ayyu al-Murid. It's a series of Ayyu al-Murid, the first Ayyu al-Murid series. And as he was conducting the class, Dr. Muhammad Sa'id Ramadan al-Bhuti came walking in. Man of ilm, wali of Allah, alim, great scholar. And when he walked in, Habib Ali Jifri saw him and he stopped the dars and he stood up. And he asked Habib, Shaykh Dr. Muhammad Sa'id to come to the front to sit on his chair. And then it was a whole big thing. Dr. Sa'id said, no, sit down and continue. And the whole dars, and it was alive on TV, it was on Iqra channel. Right? And eventually, Habib Ali insisted, and Dr. Muhammad Sa'id sat eventually in the seat where Habib Ali was teaching, and he gave some discourse. Most of it was praise of Habib Ali, but nonetheless, it was a demonstration of honoring the people of knowledge, people of taqwa and people of salah. Fast forward a few years, 2-3 years thereafter, Habib had a Ayyuha al-Murid series that he recorded in Egypt. No, before Egypt, he had recorded in Shishan, Chechnya. Alright? Beautiful masjid, similar to a Rawha. The whole series is like a Rawha. He's teaching a text, masjid is full, beautiful. Then what happened while he's teaching? The president of Chechnya walks in, Ramadan Qadirov. And as he walks in to come and greet Habib Ali Jifri, Habib continues teaching and doesn't stop the dars. The president comes to greet him, he greets, and he continues teaching. No. Because ilm is preferable. Classes of knowledge are more important. A person, the fact that he is a president of a country, doesn't mean that knowledge or the scholar should be pushed aside. No. The person, the scholar of deen, the person of taqwa, should not be pushed aside because somebody is more wealthy. That's very problematic. Ajib. So Habib Ali Jifri demonstrated a beautiful lesson when one compared Dr. Muhammad Sa'id entering the dars versus a president of a country entering the dars. So here the person, his ostentation is the expectation that you must come greet him first. If you have such a feeling in you, wherever you are, whether you're a scholar, not a scholar, a sheikh, not a sheikh, that's ostentation. Why do you feel the importance that you must be greeted and you cannot go and greet someone else? Or he finds it astonishing if somebody interacted poorly with him. Right? Do you know who I am? How could you have said this? How could you have done that? That's when we were speaking in the previous chapters. We narrated the story, I think it was Malik bin Dinar, when he met one of the sons of the king. And they were trying to pass by and he was in the middle of the road. So they told him, old man, get out of the way. Don't you know who I am? I'm coming along, you have to make way for me. So Malik bin Dinar said, I know you very well. So he said, so who am I? So he said, your origin is a scattered drop of sperm. And your end is a rotting corpse. And between that scattered drop of sperm and the rotting corpse, you're a person walking around with filth inside of you. So he said, well, does man know how also they left him? So I must find it amazing because somebody said something bad of me. Who am I? Ajib. So that is the most hidden form of ostentation. Is expect people must honor him, people should give him preference, people should make taqdeem of him. Ajib. May Allah free our hearts. Among other important lessons that Imam Ghazali shared yesterday, I just felt the need to repeat some of it. And for this reason we say that many of the Salihin, many often exerted themselves in keeping their ibadah hidden completely. Now, he then spoke about the time when ostentation comes to a person. I'm not going to re-explain this, I'm just going to mention the categories. You can go and revise. I said, I told Shaykh Zuhair to do a summary of all of this. Right? Imam Ghazali is sharing a lot. And sometimes, I'm also revising so we can, whenever I teach a fiqh, a teacher that teaches a fiqh dars, before he starts a new fiqh dars, he revises. In the Rawha, we don't revise because it's like, it's a Rawha, it's not a fiqh dars. And we're not going to test you if you know the ahkam, and there's no exam. Even though we can arrange an exam for Ibrahim. Right? But some of these discussions are important and we're not going to revise them. It's just going to become something that we read once upon a time. And that's not the idea. The idea is understand the issue so we can address the problem and remedy ourselves. The other discussion is that sometimes ostentation appears before you start the action. Sometimes ostentation appears within your heart during the action, and sometimes after the action. And he had a number of discussions around that. Then, the end of yesterday's dars, whenever he explained this, Imam Ghazali started speaking about remedying ostentation. So remember I said ostentation is a translation of riya, which means to show off, to do things for the sake of other than Allah. And I said yesterday, I'm just going to use the word ostentation and understand what it means. For me to every time say ostentation, riya, showing off, doing something for the sake of others, makes the discussion very long. Understand the word ostentation. How does one treat ostentation? So you see, if you know the reality of ostentation, you must know that ostentation has doors by which it enters you. Before I have riya, showing off, ostentation, there's a way that it reached me. Imam Ghazali said, know the doors, the madakhil, the madkhal. The madkhal is the entrance. And if you know the entrance, then close it. If you can close the doors, then ostentation can't enter your. So that's the first point he makes in terms of treating it. As for the doors of ostentation, the first is hubbul madh. You love for people to praise you. So if you're fighting in the first row, you want people must call you a warrior. If you're a person that's making a lot of ibadat, you want people to say, MashaAllah, this is a pious man, a person of wara, and taqwa and salah. And he said that if the door for your ostentation is your love to be praised, then the remedy is the same as we discussed previously to the remedy of loving status. How do you remedy the love of status? Now Ghazali had a discussion over there. What did he say? He said you have true perfection and you have a false perfection. Right? And true perfection is not when people see you as someone that is perfect. True perfection is when Allah sees you as someone that is good. And Allah sees you as someone that is great to of importance. If Allah sees you as such, then that is what you should be seeking. Because the soul, he said, naturally seeks to have status. But things were muddled up, so we sought status with creation, but we should seek status in the eyes of Allah. And that is true, complete perfection. So how do you do this? You remind yourself that for me to have ostentation and to desire for people to praise me is something that's going to harm me. It's something that's going to hurt me. If I give you, Ghazali made the example of honey. If I give you honey, very nice honey, put my nice Kawthar, al-Kawthar or Kawthar, sticker around it, I put the royal cedar, right? Nice honey. But then also I tell you, in this jar actually there's poison. No matter how nice the honey, look, who's going to eat the honey? You're going to eat the honey. You didn't know there's poison in it. The label, the royal cedar, sometimes we say royal cedar, one, higher category. But there's poison. Who's going to eat it? Maluka honey, but there's poison in it. No one's going to eat it. So no matter, you should tell yourself, no matter how sweet the praises of people may seem to me right now, it's a poison. How can I partake of it? How can I have of it? It's going to harm me. So when I know it's poison, who is going to eat honey that has poison in it? Nobody. No matter how sweet the honey is, no one's going to eat it. So I should train myself to start thinking, people are praising me. It may feel nice, but it's a poison. It's going to result in my punishment. It's going to result in my actions being wiped out and destroyed. Cancelled out. That's ihbatul amal. My action will be cancelled out. There are three things. Number one is, it's a poison, it's going to harm me, it's going to result in punishment. Number two is, it's going to cancel out all my good deeds, because if I did the good deed with ostentation. And thirdly, I'm actually mocking at Allah. How can I mock at my Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He wants me to do things for Him. I'm forgetting about Him and I'm giving preference to that Buddha and that uncle. And Ajib. Why must we impress people? Impress the Creator. You know, you heard the story about the guy that he came to propose. He came to propose. And then the father told him, you're interested in my daughter? He said, yes, I'm interested in your daughter. So the prophet told him, sit down. So when the father told him, sit down, so he wanted to impress the father, so he said, yeah, this reminds me when I used to sit in itikaf. But trying to impress the father for the daughter, your itikaf is for Allah. Not so the father can say, mashallah, you're a good husband for my daughter. The other story about three brothers went to go propose to a girl. So the first guy walked in, so the father asked him, what's your name? So he said, Luqman. So the father said, Bacha Surah Luqman. So he buckled. The next guy came in and asked him, what's your name? So he said, my name is Yasin. The father said, Bacha Surah Yasin. So he buckled. So the third guy, he noticed what's happening, so he went in. So, what's another name of Surah? He said, what's your name? So he said, my name is Muhammad, but my parents call me Nas. So if it's love for the praise of people, I need to remind myself of this. It's a poison, Allah's punishment. I'm mocking it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to cancel out my action. No matter how sweet the praise of people may be, how sweet can it be in the face of punishment, in the face of my actions being... Your actions weren't easy. Was it easy to go make Hajj? Was it easy to make Umrah? How can I let all of my money, my action, my hard work go down the drain so that somebody can praise me? It doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. The second madkhal, Imam Ghazali said, is you fear that people is going to dispraise you. They're going to look down upon you. They're not going to think you to be a good person. And he said that the treatment of that is, you must know that no matter how much people dispraise you, it means absolutely nothing if you are praiseworthy in the eyes of Allah. So how can people can rather think bad of me and Allah thinks good of me, rather than having people think good of me and then Allah thinks bad of me. So now I want to do actions for their sake, so I can be praiseworthy by them, blameworthy by Allah. What sensible person does that? So if no matter how much people think dispraise you, consider you to be dispraiseworthy, or they consider you to be rather blameworthy, what matters is if you are praiseworthy by Allah. And it is never worth it to become blameworthy by Allah, only to be considered praiseworthy by the creation. No. Then in addition, you should know, in any case, if it is that I'm after the praise of people, I want to be praiseworthy in the eyes of people, and I don't want to be blameworthy in the eyes of people, then I should know, if people were to know that in my heart I am doing things for their sake and not for Allah's sake, I will become of the most blameworthy people in their eyes. So if I am really worried about people, know that if they know what intentions of ostentation is hidden within you, they will consider you to be the most blameworthy of people. Ajib. And then the reality is when he turns away from what people has to say, and whether people believes him to be blameworthy or praiseworthy, and he focuses on his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he turns to his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he connects to his Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincerity and truthfulness, then eventually what happens is, the same people that he now turned away from, and he was not interested in them considering him to be praiseworthy any longer, that people eventually would like him in any case. In any case. Because when a person becomes close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what happens? If I have sincerity, and I turn to my Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'm worried about Him alone, and I don't care what others have to say, and why should I care what others have to say? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told Sayyidina, was it Abdullah ibn Abbas, Ya ghulam, O young man, i'lam, know, that if the entire ummah وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعُوا عَلَىٰ أَن يَضُرُّوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَن يَضُرُّوكَ إِلَّا بِشَيْءٍ كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكَ or بِمِثْلِهِ. If the whole world were to come together and harm you, they will not be able to harm you save to the degree and the extent that Allah has decreed. And if the whole world were to come together, أَن يَنْفَعُوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَن يَنْفَعُوكَ they will never be to benefit you. They will never be able to benefit you, save to the extent that Allah has decreed that they must benefit you. So whatever, if people can't harm me and they can't benefit me, why should I be worried about their praise? Nonetheless, when a person turns away from people and what people have to think of him, and he focuses on his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he turns to his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what eventually happens is Allah loves that person. وَإِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا نَادَى جِبْرِيلٌ. When Allah loves a person, He calls Jibreel. And He says, Ya Jibreel, inni uhibbu fulan, I love so and so. فَأَحِبُّوهُ, so you also love him. And then Allah tells Jibreel that go to the inhabitants of the heavens and tell them. So Jibreel goes to the inhabitants of the heaven. And he tells the inhabitants of the heaven, Ya Ahl as-Sama, inna Allah ahabba fulanan. Allah loves so and so. فَأَحِبُّوهُ, so you also love him. And then angels come to this world and make the announcement upon everyone on this earth. An announcement that our hearts receive, but because of the state of our hearts we don't hear it. Allah makes the announcement to the inhabitants of the earth. Inna Allah ahabba fulanan, Allah loves such and such a person. فَأَحِبُّوهُ, so you also love him. That is an announcement that reaches our hearts and reaches our souls. We can't hear it because of our state, but the soul hears it. And then sometimes you find that you just love somebody. Why you love him, you can't explain. You meet one of the great salihin, awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you find that you have this strong love and attachment to them, and you don't know where it comes from. Your soul heard the announcement that the soul should love that person. Right? So in any case, if I learn to turn away from people and I don't care about their praise, the end result will be that they will love me. Right? But the door to that is Allah, to make your focus Allah and not the creation. The third doorway, pathway, madkhal for shaitan, or rather for ostentation to enter our hearts. The first was what? Hubbu al-jah, love for status. The second was hubbu al-madh, loving people to praise you. The third is tama', desiring what people have. Right? This is a wealthy man. If he loves me because of my knowledge, he's going to give me stuff. So I do stuff to impress people so that I can benefit from them. Ajib. He said, how you remedy that is you should know that no matter how much you try to impress somebody, the fact that you're going to benefit from him, there's a big question mark whether you will actually benefit from him or not. He may be kind to you, he may not be kind to you. It's a question mark. No matter what, the person can be a billionaire and I can appear in front of him as the greatest wali of Allah. Whether he's actually going to give me something or not is, I don't know. He may not. I found, just in our community is a community that likes giving slavas. Many a times, poor people, they give more to the Imam or the Shaykh than what wealthy people give. That's like Mujarrab. Speak to any Imam, you'll find. Not entirely. There's a lot of good people in the world. Nobody here should develop a bad opinion about anybody. That will lead to your destruction. We must have husnul dhan of every person under the sun. Right? But in line of the discussion over here, I want to impress people to benefit what they have. I don't know if they're going to give me or not. So even if I have successfully impressed them, I fool them by making them think that I'm a scholar or I'm a pious or I'm what. Whether they're going to give me or not is uncertain. There's uncertainty regarding it. But the fact that when I do it for their sake, that I'm going to lose out on Allah's pleasure, there's conviction that I'm going to lose out on Allah's pleasure. So he says, if my intention is to benefit from somebody, then I should remedy that ostentation to benefit from what someone else possesses by telling myself that even if I do the act for this person's sake, that I'm trying to impress, whether I'm going to benefit from him or not is uncertain. But when I do it for his sake and not for Allah's sake, what is certain is that Allah is going to be angry with me. I'm going to lose out on Allah's pleasure. So how do I give up the certainty of Allah's pleasure and the certainty of Allah's anger for somebody to impress somebody that I may or may not benefit from. You understand what he's saying? Ajib. And know that Allah is the one that is in charge. And if somebody must benefit you in any way, it's only if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places that in his heart. So you should occupy yourself with Allah, not with the creation. Subhanallah. He said if a person places the greatness and the luxury and the high levels of ecstasy that a person experiences in the afterlife, may experience the afterlife, and how ostentation, riyah, will deprive the person of all that, then if he constantly reminds himself of this, he will find that his heart starts to turn away from the creation. And he becomes focused on the Creator. And when he becomes focused on the Creator, then the spiritual lights of sincerity overflows on him. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him support from Allah's side. One of the things Imam Ghazali mentioned yesterday, he said that, not Ghazali, who are we quoting? I was quoting one of the scholars. He said that people and animals should all become the same to you. Not that you should treat people like animals. You should have respect for human beings. You should honor them. You should show reverence. You should have adab and etiquette with any human being. But when they say that they should become like animals, he meant that, like if my dog is watching me pray, it doesn't impact the status of my prayer. I don't stand with more humility because my dog is watching me. Similarly, any human being that's watching me shouldn't affect my prayer in any way. I should see all creation like animals, such that I only act for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, then Imam Ghazali said, Khair, now I've treated ostentation. I saw the madakhil. It comes through hubbul jah, status, hubbul madh, love for praise, and desiring what people have in their hands. I understand the problem. I'm remedying it. I'm closing those doors. I'm not allowing ostentation to come to me. Right? I'm not worried about status. I'm not worried about praise. I'm not worried. I'm focused on my Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, now what happens with a person is, what will happen with him is that ostentation still creeps into that person. When a person said, قررت هذا كله على نفسي ونفر الرياء قلبي لكن ربما هجم علي وارد الرياء بغتة. Out of nowhere, riyah just enters me. How do I deal with that now? I'm safeguarding myself, I'm closing the doors, I'm reminding myself what I need to remind myself, but from nowhere, ostentation comes into me. It happens to me. I'm focused, I'm doing what I need to do, but when I'm standing and I'm reciting Quran and I realize that someone's looking at me from nowhere, riyah enters me. So Ghazali said, if this is your state, then the origin of the cure for the state that you find yourself in is you must keep your ibadah hidden. And tukhfiya ibadatak is how you keep your bad deeds hidden. Or in that there is safety for you. Ajib. I made two examples yesterday. One of the Salihin, he fasted for 40 years and his family never knew he fasted. Another wali of Allah, he recited a few thousand khatam. He used to lay in the lap of his wife, and while laying in the lap of his wife, he recited a few thousand khatams in that position while laying with his head in the lap of his wife, and his wife did not know he was reading Quran. Keep your ibadah hidden. I was speaking about how Habib Umar conceals his fasting sometimes in yesterday's dars. One of the brothers, Hafidz Ahmad, told me he actually observed at one of the programs, Habib offering him water and tea, but he wasn't drinking. He made like he drinks and then he puts it down. He makes like he drinks and he puts it down. And then he asked some of the students that were there, and they said, no, only someone with a fine eye would observe that Habib's not drinking or eating, he's actually fasting. But the person offering him doesn't want to make the person feel bad, so he takes it and he makes like he's drinking. Keep your ibadah hidden. Now, and then he said, keeping your ibadah hidden is something which is difficult initially, but once it becomes part of you, it becomes easy. And if I happen to be in a public space and I'm almost attacked, this ostentation from nowhere comes and enters my heart, he said you should renew the intentions in your heart of the remedies that we spoke about previously. That you're presenting yourself for the punishment of Allah. How people is incapable of benefiting you or harming you in any way, such that this like for ostentation gains the upper hand. Imam Ghazali actually speaks about, he says that there's two things within you. Removing the desire for ostentation, for people, for praise, it's never eradicated entirely unless you become of the great awliya of Allah. So you always have this battle fighting in you, a desire to be seen, a desire to be seen, to be happy with people's observation of you, and dislike for ostentation. It's a battle that's going to happen in you. And you must always push and encourage the side of you that dislikes ostentation to have the upper hand. Now, as for removing it entirely, you don't have that. Ghazali said you don't have that. What you are mukallaf with is to dislike it. If those feelings come, repel them. Dislike it. Censure yourself or blame yourself for wanting to be seen or to be recognized. Dislike it. Break it down. That's what you are mukallaf with. As for the thoughts that enter your mind, Allah does not hold you accountable for that. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. He then entered a discussion about, I touched on this yesterday also, entering into an act of worship with an intention of being a role model for others. With an intention of being a role model for others. Allah sometimes places you in a position where people are observing you, and if you are in that position and you don't set a good precedent, من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة فله أجرها وأجر من عمل بها, then what happens is students lose out on a good example. So what should you do? Right? So Imam Ghazali gave an ajib remedy over here. He said that it's permissible in that instance to do acts of worship in front of people if you're in a position where people look up to you and you want to set a good precedent and example for them, right? And encourage them to do good. So somebody normally doesn't make Salatul Duha, but when he's in the masjid, he always plays Salatul Duha because he's one of the Imams, or he's a teacher, or he's a munshid, or he's one of the organizers, and people look up to him. So he doesn't usually pray. He's praying now. He's trying to have his intentions purely for Allah. He's not doing it to impress anybody, but he just doesn't want to fail in being a good example. Right? So he said that's permissible. However, this person must, of course, ensure that he should ensure that he has dislike for ostentation within him, and he should be pushing it away. And how he's able to determine, whether he's actually doing this so that people can see him as a pious person that is doing good deeds, or whether he's simply just doing it to be a good example, he said he can do the following test. He should assume that is there any one of his contemporaries that could take his role of being a good example. Right? So you have, who do you have? You have Ismail, you have Zuhair. Ismail say, I want to be a good example. Right? But now he says, I'm fighting and I have this like for ostentation, but I'm not doing this. I don't know what's sincere, but I just want to be a good example so people don't see something good in me and they follow. So you see that you can actually test yourself if that is purely your intention or not by telling yourself, you know what? There's Zuhair. Zuhair can also do what I do. And he can be a good example for people. I don't need to be that good example. He can suffice me of being a good example for people. And if his heart is content and happy with that, in having someone else be the good example, then he's safe. But if his heart, no, why must I don't want him? I want to be the good example, and it shows you, no, you're not doing this just to be a good example. You're doing this because you want people to see you as someone that is pious and someone of ibadah and so forth and so on. The Ghazali gets into some of these technical discussions. He then told us that similar to doing actions for the sake of people, similar to that is leaving action out for the sake of people. Now, he quoted Fudayl ibn Iyad, who said that leaving out action fearing that you will be doing with ostentation is riya. As for acting for the sake of others, he said that's a shirk. May Allah grant us sincerity. And Sayyid Ghazali, he spoke about this at length. We're coming to the end this now. No. It's a slippery slope. And the only way we can be successful is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us. People of Basra was asked, who is your leader? They said, Hassan al-Basri is our leader. He said, how did he become your leader? He said, when all of Basra was in need of his knowledge, and he was not in need of anything from anyone in Basra. He was not in need of people's dunya. That's how he became a leader. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And yesterday we quoted the words of Imam al-Haddad, who said that the speech of people of sincerity and truthfulness has a nur and blessing that reaches the hearts of their communities, even if they have no eloquence. As how the speech of people of ostentation, of showing off and bragging, their speech has a darkness that reaches people even if they are the most eloquent of people. The most. Therefore they said that which comes from the heart reaches the heart. And that which comes from the tongue but not the heart, meaning without sincerity, لا يجاوز الآذان, doesn't go past the ears. It's rhymes. ما خرج من الجنان, from the heart, دخل الجنان, enters the heart. وما خرج من اللسان, but that which comes from the lisan does not go beyond the adhan, doesn't go beyond the ears, doesn't affect people. There's a story about Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, when one of his students, his son or one of his students, wanted a podium to do da'wah. So his son, and then he spoke with the most beautiful eloquence, you name it, lessons of the greatest caliber, and no one was touched by it. They don't just sat and listen. And they were thinking of his father and making istimdad from his father. And then Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani came in and he said, somebody gave, what did he say now? His wife gave him something and it fell and it broke. And the whole majlis broke down crying. The whole majlis, his kalam came with nur, it came with light, it came from his heart. This reminds me of a poem Mona Shamil Ras wrote me on one occasion when my daughter passed away. Ajib. When I was in Jamaat at that time in the, what masjid is that now? What are the two masjids in Strand? The Jami Masjid and the Castro Masjid. And he came to my home that morning and he greeted me and he was crying and hugged me and he gave me a poem that he wrote after the passing of my daughter. I'll actually see if we can find it. The poem consisted of some praises that we are not worthy of. But it was just after we were in the khidmah of Habib when she drowned. And he gave me the poem crying, and he said that he wrote this poem for me to console my heart and that of my families. And he said that last night, he completed it last night, he fell asleep and he dreamed of the Prophet. And the Prophet asked him, can you read the poem to me? So he read the poems. The Prophet said, read it again. So he read it the second time. So he said, read it again. So he read it for the third time. And then I remember sharing the poem with Ismail Ali. And he was saying that the language in this poem is so bad. But it doesn't matter. It came from a sincere heart. It came from a place of sincerity where there was no ostentation. And it resulted in the Prophet also wanting to hear it not once, not twice, 3 times. Ajib. So, how is our speech going to affect people? It will affect people to the extent of our sincerity. The more ostentation, the more we want to be seen, the more we want, the less effective our words will have. Therefore, there are many lectures, many classes, many things, but are people changing, are lives changing, are people drawing close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Ajib. And if you see khair coming from any of us, like some of you may be thinking, mashallah, some good is coming from the Rawha or from the Mawlid. That's the barakah of our teachers. Right? Sometimes a person can be, the teacher can be a sinner and he can be insincere and he can be showing off and he can, but because of the barakah of the intentions of the teacher, of the Shaykh, Allah allows benefit to spread through their sincerity, through the fact that they don't have any ostentation, through the fact that their objective is to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then whatever good may come from an individual, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Inna Allah la yu'ayyidu hadha deen bi rajul fajir. Allah can assist this deen even with a wrongdoer. That's if you think any good may come from any of our programs. That's a rajwiyah. Many of us, the mashayikh, we consider ourselves to be sinners and wrongdoers, but it's the barakah of our teachers that allow good to happen within our institutions, within our masajid. Their barakah, their sincerity. May Allah grant us on that sincerity. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Bismillah. Did you tell me it's time? Bismillah, Bismillah.
الزم باب ربك واترك كل دون واسأله السلام من دار الفتون لا يضيق صدرك فالحديث يهون الله المقادر والعالم شؤون لا يكثر همك ما قدر يكون فكرك واختيارك دعهما وراك والتدبير أيضا واشهد من براك مولاك المهيمن إنه يراك فوض له أمورك وانسر في الظنون لا يكثر همك ما قدر يكون فكرك واختيارك دعوما وراك والتدبير أيضا واشهد من براك مولاك المهيمن إنه يراك
فكرك واحزن في الظنون، لا يكثر همك ما قدر
يكون.
لو وليم وكيف قول ذي الحماق يعترض على الله الذي خلق وقضى وقدر كل شيء بحق. يا قلبي تنبه واترك المجون، لا يكثر همك
ما قدر يكون. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. من كتاب مزن السكينة والسكون، شرح قصيدة لا يكثر عمك ما قدر يكون، للإمام الحداد، شرح علامة الحبيب عمر بن محمد بن سالم بن حفيظ، نفع الله به وبكم في الدارين آمين. إلى أن قال: فكرك واختيارك دع ما وراك، ولا تجعل أمامك إلا اعتماد على رب الأنام، والاعتمام بخير إمام في كل وجهة وحركة وسكون، فإنك لن تستطيع أن تكون بين يديه في حال أجمل ولا أكمل ولا أفضل من حال اعتدائك بحبيبه وتبعية أحب الخلق إليه. والذين انطووا في الحبيب شأنهم عجيب غريب رهيب، فحي الله أولئك القوم من كل بر منيب وسالك وأديب. فكرك واختيارك دع ما وراك، واعلم أن اختيار الله خير لك من اختيارك الذي ينابه القبح، وأن تدبيره أجمل وأفضل من تدبيرك الذي يلحقه السوء. وحسن تدبير الله وجميل اختياره منزه عن كل سوء وقبح، فإذا أراد بك خير جل جلاله أحسن لك التدبير واختار لك الجميل. فكرك واختيارك دع ما وراك، والتدبير أيضا إذن فنحتاج إلى استعمال الفكر بالميزان الشرعي، وكذلك استعمال الفكر بالميزان الشرعي، وكذلك التدبير الشرعي في كيفية الوصول إلى أداء الواجب، وكيفية القيام بالسنة والإكثار من الطاعات، وكيفية ترك المحرم والابتعاد عنه، وكيفية ترك المكروه. تدبيرك لهذا أمر شرعي، لكن مع هذا التدبير في شؤون المصالح العامة ودفع المضار استعمل فكرك على أنه آلة مخلوقة واعتمد على الخالق. أما فيما يتعلق بالاعتماد واستناد على الفكر واختيار والتدبير فاجعله وراك، لأنك قد تختار شيئا وفيه هلاكك من حيث لا تشعر. قال تعالى: وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم، وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم، والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. وقال عز من قائل: فعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. الهجرة درس في الاعتماد على الله.
نعم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الإمام الحداد رحمه الله said فكرك واختيارك, your intellect, your thought process, your choices, place it behind you. He said, meaning that you should use it in line with the balance of the Sharia. وَلَا يَسْتَعْمِلَاكَ, and your thought or intellect should not use you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made your intellect and your choice subservient to you, and Allah has not made you subservient to your intellect and choice. So let your choice be that which in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated. And let your thought or your intellect be in line with the manner and way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to use it. So you use it to ponder in His greatness, to ponder in His magnificence, so that His greatness increases in your heart, and that you increase in Iman, and you increase in gnosis, and you increase in conviction. Your intellect should not tell you that Salah is not wajib. Your intellect must be governed by the Sharia. So, when the Sharia tells you Salah is wajib, your intellect should be used. How can I perfect my Salah? Right? Your intellect must be governed. In Aqidah, we have a discussion that says, in determining what is good and bad, al-husn wal-qubh amrani aqliyani am shar'iyani. Is it something that the intellect can determine, or is it something that the Sharia determines? The intellect has no room. Allah decides what's good and bad, and the intellect must follow that. Your intellect must be used in a way how you can please your Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your intellect doesn't decide whether I must make salah or not make salah. Allah decides. But my intellect should be used in how can I perfect my salah? How can I maximize my time to make my salah? How can I be present with my Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my salah? Your intellect can't come and decide that I'm fasting every Monday and Thursday is wajib. Lots of people have used the intellects to govern the Sharia, which is a problem. So they determine that a lady doesn't need to cover herself. Or they determine that the Sharia said, Somu li ru'yatihi, fast when you sight the moon. And they say, no, the intellect, they say, no, we can just fast when the moon is born. Why must it be seen? Doesn't matter what conclusion your intellect allows you to reach, it must be governed by Allah's law, by Allah's Sharia. No? And then Habib made the example, he said that, this was yesterday what they read, he said that, if we give a man who claims to be a person of intellect and strength, we give him a Malik. Now, Malik is a king. He has a king, a wazir, a minister. We give him a dog, and we give him a khinzir, a pig. And then we tell him that the objective of the pig, it will suffice you in consuming all the dirt in the space that you operate. Like a pig is often used just to what? To consume whatever dirt is on your farm. Right? And then you tell him, as for the dog is there to protect you and to push all harm away from you. Right? However, the dog and the pig must operate under the guidance of the king and under the minister. Right? That's the bounds of the Sharia. If a person now comes and he says to the dog, Ya kalb, oh dog, you do what you want. And he says to the pig, oh pig, you do what you want. And then he comes to the king and he tells the king and he tells the minister that the two of you are completely subservient to fulfill every need of the pig and the dog. What's going to happen? To execute whatever the dog and the pig wants. Have you asked, is this a person of intellect? He has made the king and the minister subservient to the dog and the pig. So he said, what if he was to say to the king and the minister, prostrate to the dog and the pig? So he said that every person has with him a heart, intellect, anger and desire. And these four things represents the king, the minister, the dog and the pig. So the person who has prostrated, meaning submitted to his desires and his anger in disobeying the Sharia, what has he done? He has made his intellect and his heart subservient to his desires. That's when the intellect is not governed by the Sharia. So he has made it subservient to his desires. And that's what's happening. Is it not happening in the world today? Habib asked the question, the person that made his heart and intellect prostrate to his desires and his anger, his whims and his fancies. The Western world, they call this now, what do they call it? Hey? Not liberalism. They call it basically respecting how people wish to see themselves. They call it whatever the advancement in terms of culture and the whole idea of respecting how people feel about themselves or what people want to. Somebody believes himself to be a dog and someone else believes himself to identify as a cat and someone else identifies. It's the most ridiculous thing under the sun. It's complete desires. It's complete nonsense. And then they're forcing the world to take their intellects and to be subservient to this nonsense, to accept it. They are forcing communities on large scale to accept it, to be subservient to it. That's like telling your aql to prostrate to your shahwa. How on earth must my intellect accept a human being that says he or she is a dog? Or a female that says she's a male, or a male that says he's a female? How can my intellect accept that? That's what happens when your intellect is not governed by a sharia, by a set of laws. When the intellect is not governed, then khalas. They will constantly push the bench of what is acceptable according to ethics, what is acceptable according to cultures, what is acceptable according to morals. They will push and push and push until the intellect will have no role to play at all any longer. Therefore, your intellect must be governed by the Sharia. If you don't understand that Allah decides what is good and what is bad, and you allow that your whims and fancies to determine what is good and bad, and thus govern your intellect, that's not intelligence, that's stupidity. فَالَّذِي سَجَدَ لِشَهْوَتِهِ, the person who allows his intellect and heart to prostrate to his desire and his angers, in contradicting the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the difference between that person and the one who instructs his king and minister to prostrate to the pig and the dog? No difference. فِكْرَكْ وَاخْتِيَارَكْ دَعْهُمَا وَرَاكْ. Place your intellect and your choice behind you and put your trust in Allah. Let Allah choose for you, for His choices are better for you. No. We continue our discussion tomorrow. Time is not enough for you. May Allah grant us tawfiq. Bismillah.
ربنا انفعنا بما علمتنا، رب علمنا الذي ينفعنا، رب فقهنا وفقه أهلنا وقرابتي لنا في ديننا مع أهل الكتر أنثى وذكر، رب وفقنا ووفقهم لما ترتضي قولا وفعلا كرما، وارزق الكل حلالا دائما، وأخل أتقياء علماء، نقضى بالخير ونكفى كل شر، ربنا واصلح لنا كل الشؤون، وأقر بالرضا منك العيون، واقض عنا ربنا كل الديون قبل أن تأتينا رسل منون، واغفر استر أنت أكرم من ستر، وصلاة الله تغشى المصطفى من إلى الحق دعانا والوفاء، بكتاب فيه للناس شفاء، وعلى الآل الكرام شرفاء، وعلى الصحب المصابيح الغرار. اللهم اهدنا بهداك واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك، ولا تولنا وليا سواك، ولا تجعلنا ممن خالف أمرك وعصاك، وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اكترفنا وأننا أسرفنا على رضا أشرفنا،
فتب علينا توبة
تغسل كل حوبا، واستر لنا العورات وآمن الروعات، واغفر لوالدينا ربي ومولودينا، والآل والإخوان وسائر الخلان وكل ذي محبة
أو جيرات أو صحبة
والمسلمين أجمع آمين ربي اسمع فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول صلى وسلم ربي عليه عد الحب وآله وصحبه عداد طش الصحب والحمد للإله في البدء والتناهي سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماته.
Tonight in Dar Mustafa is the 17th of Ramadan. But us it will be the 16th, and in the Arab lands the 17th. And the 17th is a special night. It's a night of Badr, a night Rasul spent awake in worship, crying in front of his Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the 17th of Ramadan was also the night when the Quran was revealed from the sacred tablet to the Sama'ud Dunya, to the skies of this dunya. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. That year, Laylatul Qadr was the 17th of Ramadan. And the proceedings in Dar Mustafa are really beautiful on this night. Sayyid Habib Umar completes the Khatam of the Quran in his Tarawih. They make dua of the Khatam in the Salatul Witr. In fact, the Qunut of Habib Umar every night now for the next half of the month of Ramadan, you have an opportunity to Ajib, this is off. If you have an opportunity to follow the Qunut, even if it's a recording, you should do so. The praise of Habib Umar in his Qunut are very, very special. It's all walidat, inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And especially this evening in the Salatul Witr. Usually Habib's brother used to complete the Khatam for him and make the Witr, but Habib will be making it more than likely this evening. And then they have a march, is Zaf, from Habib's house down the road of Dar Mustafa, past Dar Zahra, back to Dar Mustafa. Already now they brought out the Bawariq. The Bawariq are the flags with which they lead these demonstrations of love of Allah and the Rasul and the Quran and the Sunnah and Deen and the night of Badr. And that march, when I attended it for the first time many years ago, in the Rawha before the march, Habib was saying that one of the Salihin in the previous year when they had the Zaf on the 17th of Ramadan, he said he witnessed a dream that as the Zaf was taking place on the lands in the city of Tarim, a similar Zaf was taking place in the heavens. So it was a very special night in Tarim. May Allah grant that you get to experience the 17th of Ramadan in Tarim. And then they keep the whole night awake in Ibadah. And they, after the Qiyamul Layl, which is long before Fajr, our Tahajjud is very close to Fajr, yeah? So it's difficult to have any program after Tahajjud because we delay it. People must work, so people can get more sleep, and then we have Tahajjud, and then Fajr, breakfast and Fajr. Which makes it complicated, yeah, but usually they have Qiyamul Layl in the middle of the night. And after Qiyamul Layl, they'll have a break, and then they'll have breakfast. And then they're going to read the Qasida Badariya, and after Fajr, they will read the poem Jaliyatul Qadr. Our tartib here in Cape Town is that on the night of Badr, we gather after Taraweeh to recite the poem Jaliyatul Qadr, which is a poem of prayer where we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the names of the companions that fought in the Battle of Badr, and the companions that fought in the Battle of Uhud, and some of the great awliya and salihin of this ummah. And that's a very beautiful program we have. We encourage our brothers and sisters in our community to join us. It will be here in the hall. The men will gather in the hall, and the females will gather in the masjid. And if you haven't experienced, it's something to experience on the 17th of Ramadan. May Allah accept. بهذه النوايا ما نسأل صالح وسيد الحبيب عمر بن كتب زمان وإلى حضرة النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم.